So I teach foresight in the College of Business, and a lot of people ask me, well, in the foresight, what is that? Is that like, some sort of predictive algorithm or big data or something along those lines? And I describe it as really more around the capability to ask and answer ambiguous questions. And you'll notice it's not just answering the questions, because asking, framing, defining that question can be the most important part. Once you have a good question defined, the pathway toward good, useful answers sort of can fall into place. But defining that question is at the very heart. And that's where this categorization can be a constraint, right? That in business, especially in business, we live in a world where optimization and efficiency are just almost have too much influence, right? That we define our questions around things that can be answered, that there's a right answer, and the challenge is to get there with the least time and the least cost and the least uncertainty, and leads us to define our questions in things that can be answered and then executed on. And I call these definitive questions, right? And business leaders are great at this, right? What's our return on investment? What is our labor productivity? What are our inventory turns? All of these sorts of questions are easily asked and answered, but they're not the types of questions that lead to breakthrough transformative innovation. Ambiguous questions, on the other hand, sometimes require that the very first step is pushing back on the question, right? The question becomes, are we asking the right question? And redefining that question and challenging it and tearing into the assumptions around what is framing that question can be game changers in terms of the possibilities. And then rather than an acceleration down a straight line toward a single answer, sometimes the pathway is exploratory, and it gets a little messy, and sometimes it's hard to manage in a process that emphasizes optimization and efficiency. But the payoff is that you don't create an understanding of one definitive, predictive right answer, but rather an inventory of possibilities with deep understanding that can really inform our anticipatory capability. And this is how we can knock down the barriers that are sometimes burdened with those categories that our mind brings into our decision-making process. So the challenge as leaders is, how do we guide a team, lead a team when the destination is not quite unknown? And that's one of the challenges we'll talk about in the process of this book club and webinar. Let me give you a quick example. All right, so we were working with an innovation team out at Microsoft a couple of years back before the pandemic. And now here's a company that absolutely gets innovation and breakthrough technologies and has an eye towards the future. I mean, one of the companies that others aspire to be like in their innovation process. And they brought us out to help have a bit of a future-oriented take on it. And one of the areas that we were workshopping was around the education space, certainly a ripe space, market space, opportunity space for Microsoft. And so we're workshopping it. And the question at the beginning of the process that they came up with was how will people learn in the future? And certainly an interesting question, right? Filled with options of how to apply technology. But as we were processing through the journey here, most of the ideas and the discussion and the exploration that came out imagined an education system that looked an awful lot like the current one, in terms of the prototypical student seeking to, excel on an exam that would earn a credential that would, do all of the things that we've been doing in education for hundreds of years, just with more technology applied. And they really weren't, the ideas weren't really that compelling. And so we challenged the Microsoft team to go back and rethink the question, reimagine what the question might be. And they were struggling with it. It was like, man, oh man, we thought we were making great progress, and now you sent us back to ground zero. But then somebody from Microsoft came up with the idea that rather than explore how people will learn in the future, what if we explored why people will learn in the future. And it just changed the whole dynamic, right? We started to imagine, well, what is a student? What is somebody who seeks to learn? And maybe it's not a high school student or a college applicant or something along those lines. Maybe it's somebody mid-career who's had their skill set automated away, or maybe it's a retiree looking to learn a new language or start a new business. And maybe the learning is more participatory and contributory, that the students create the curriculum. It just changed the whole dynamic, and the answers started to really come to life. And so that is in the context what we're speaking to in this context of how do we bust down some of the constraints of the categorical thinking and open up that full spectrum mindset to ask a different set of questions. And that's just the first rung on the ladder that we're going to be putting in play. There's another video that will take us deeper into Bob Johansson's full spectrum thinking. And that'll set up our webinar on anticipatory innovation on February 10th. So I hope to see many of you at that webinar. Thanks for your time, and have a great day, and go Irish.